Alright boys, here we are back again with another animation review. Now here's the thing, we are going to look at the Will of the Herrscher animated short, but the problem is I actually tried to record this before and the footage corrupted, so you're not going to get my raw original reaction to the video itself, but we're just gonna like watch it back, and if I see something I'll pause at it and we'll talk about it. If you want to watch the thing again, click off this video and go watch it so that you can sort of recap and not have it interrupted by me pausing, because I've already watched this, so it is what it is, you know what I mean? Also, if you're gonna drop a comment like, hey, Honkai Impact 3rd is so much better than so-and-so, I don't give a fuck, okay? Just don't, if you're not gonna add anything to the conversation and actually talk about animation, or at least something that's like noteworthy about the game itself, don't comment at all, please. It's another comment that I just have to sort through in order to get to anything of substance. So please just don't leave pointless comments, okay? Anyway, now that we got that out of the way, yeah, we're here to just analyze the art, so that's what we're gonna do, okay? I'm going to unpause it. We're going to talk about anything from post-production to 3D art for the models and also the animation itself. Anything that I might notice that could be 2D. I mean, of course, VFX is usually 2D, so we'll likely talk about some of that stuff too. Sit back, relax, like the video, comment if you have something to add to the conversation, and consider subscribing, because I do videos like this all the time. So let's get into it. So before we get into this next shot, I have comments to make about this next shot as well. But before we get into that, let's sort of go back and talk about what's going on here. So I don't know what's happening in the lore of this, so I'm not going to really comment on that. But I do think, oh yeah, another thing we're going to comment on is voice acting. Or rather the sort of post-processing effects that are used over the voice acting, because I think throughout this entire animated short, the voice acting is good, quite consistently, at least in terms of like Japanese animation, because there's a different standard of voice acting for Japanese animation versus Japanese drama film and things like that, right? So for this, I would say voice acting is on point. It's consistent with the quality that you would expect from a Japanese, like from an anime. Here, honestly, I don't have any issues with the post-processing. I think they did a really good job. Everything seems to have depth of field, camera focus. There's lens flares for the sun, although right here I don't think there should be any flares. Unless this camera lens does not have a hood. Usually a camera hood will... I have a camera, but I don't think it's in this room right now. But basically, let's just say... usually... with industry cameras, and we can assume that that's the perspective they're trying to sell here. With industry cameras, let's say, okay, this is a manga volume, not mine, but let's say this is your camera, right? Your camera hood would be something that sort of clips onto the lens to sort of block out sunlight, and also it depends on the camera's angle. You might not need the camera hood at all, but yeah, it usually blocks out sunlight and prevents these random like stray lens flares that might be, you know, happening from infraction on the lens. But I mean, usually almost every single industry camera will have it. This could be a amateur animation error where it's like maybe they didn't think about that, but yeah. That is the sort of research that you would have to do usually in animation studios and in any sort of animation industry, sort of figure out how does a camera work in real life and how can you emulate that the best you can. Like here, no lens flare. I think they did well, but yeah, that's the only problem with post processing that I have here. Or not really. It's not really post processing. Most post processing is actually, yeah. What am I saying? Yeah. Most of post processing is like the effects that go on top. So anything that goes like depth of field and lens flares, lens blur, any sort of like color correction, color grading, value correction, exposure, all of that stuff. Here, I think this is really well animated. I'm not sure if they actually handled this completely in 3D, but I think they probably animated her eye in 2D, because the rest of her body does look 3D here, but that eye sort of pops out in composition, just in my opinion. But I mean, if you look here, that could very well be 3D from this angle too. So I don't know. It looks 2D, but it could be 3D. My only complaint about this is that this looks very washed out in terms of exposure. Like her skin is almost as pale as the background, and if her hair wasn't there to break up that composition, you would not be able to tell where her head starts and where it ends. The voice acting complaint that I have here at this particular moment is just that the sound is very ear grating because of the amount of effects that they slammed onto her voice here in order to make it sound more like possessed, basically. Yeah, that is a very ear grating sound to listen to, and you know, maybe it's part of the intention to be like, yeah, this is just not Kiana, so it should sound ear grating and something not pleasant. In my opinion, though, I think it can be a bit much. Now, in terms of animation, really good for this part. I will say, though, animation is different from physics simulation, okay? Physics simulation is what happens as a reaction to animation, and usually nobody is doing that by hand. So we can talk about a little bit of physics simulation here, because her hair, let me turn this down a little bit, just so that it's not giving anyone a headache by listening to it multiple times, but, and by anyone, I mean me. So her hair physics are definitely just not doing so hot. And I think it's a sort of a byproduct of the fact that her hair is all just one solid object. It looks like it's strands, but really they just cut out little parts of this object, and it's more like a plastic slab that just kind of flops around in the wind. That's the sort of physics that's on it. And hair simulation has always been really difficult to do, even with Moana, for instance. That movie released, I don't even know how many years ago, almost 7 years ago now, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the hair simulation was something that they had to invent completely new technology to do, because her hair is very curly and it's hard to simulate that. But then you also have movies like Tangled, where that came out even earlier than Moana, and the hair simulation is genuinely amazing, and they still had to create new tech for that. So usually studios will have to create new hair tech if they want it to look as clean as possible. Now in this art style, I think you can get away with a lot more a lot less nuance in hair simulation, because of the fact that everything looks a bit more like plastic. Like these characters just kind of look like plastic figurines with cell shading. So it allows you to get away with a lot more things, a lot more. What's the word for it? It's not laziness. So it's like it allows you to get away with, I guess, a lot less of the trouble of having to simulate thousands upon thousands of hairs off the top of someone's head. If they're going for a more realistic style, obviously you have like individual strands, right? But this is like, there's wads of hair that just are little spikes, and you can make them wiggle around. So yeah, there's just a lot less simulation workload to actually work with. But here they just didn't really go for that. I actually do see some individual strands in here though, but it seems to be all like within the same bone plane, so it's kind of randomized along that bone plane, and that's probably why it all moves the exact same way. Not the exact same way, but like it all moves on the same curve. Here, I think the cubes are very noticeably on a different layer of composition completely. Probably just like dragged into the frame rather than existing in a 3D space. I mean, obviously they are 3D objects, but like the way that they're composited in, it's like there's you can feel the difference between the layer where Kiana is along with the background versus wherever these cubes are in space. It just feels separated. There's like, it doesn't feel like they exist in the same space here. This right here, I have no complaints about it, although the sound design is sort of carrying it. Like if we give this a listen. Sound design makes that way better, right? But just watching it muted, it just kind of wobbles around with a little bit of screen shake, and it doesn't quite look like anything much. Now I do like the animation for this eye opening up. Yeah, that's really well done. I don't think I have any complaints about that. Again, it does seem like it's composited in after the rest of it. Here, I would say the 2D effects are going pretty okay. Although, okay, right here you can tell that that background was not drawn or captured as at a English needs to be spoken. That background wasn't captured at a resolution that was meant to be like blown up as big as it is. Because even though it is blurred, you can still see like pixel noise in the background. This bit does struggle, and I do wonder if they had to edit the lighting in post-processing rather than inserting it into the 3D space. Seems like it may have been quite likely. This right here I don't really have much of an issue with, aside from the fact that when you see the back end of this mech, whatever it is, like when you see the more distant portions of its body, or yeah, this looks like a body rather than a vehicle. There's like, you can sort of see how it's not really composited to be a part of the portal. Like it doesn't phase back into the portal or anything like that. It stays out once it's out, and it does feel a little bit strange that the perspective hasn't quite, like it hasn't really gotten closer the further out it gets. It all seems like it's the exact same distance. Now this is a really good shot that sells everything that's happening here. You can see the impact, the thing that caused the impact, and the thing that's reacting to the impact. That is, honestly, really clear composition. I like this. I like this a lot. Here's the next scene that I was gonna have some comments about. Because there is no point in having the crotch shot, but I mean, hey, it's there, and those who enjoy it will enjoy it. Now, here's something that's actually worth talking about. This action pose with her tumbling. I have some complaints, and then I also have some praises. So this right here, really good. This action pose, it tells me everything that just happened. This is a character that has obviously just been tumbling across the ground. Like if you look at this frame, yeah, she's definitely been tumbling. But another thing that I really want to point out is the 2D effects here, with the, I guess, the debris that flies off the ground with her impact. It is something that's very simplistic, and I can see sort of what they did, where it's like if you just take a lasso tool and you just like draw a little shape, right? You sort of like wiggle the mouse around, or your pen, wiggle that around as you're going across the screen, and then just come back around, do that, whatever, and then fill it in with gray, right? The next thing you would do is take that exact same selection to a new layer, reduce some parts of the selection so that you have less of it, and then you just fill that with a darker gray. And once you have that, you combine both of those layers into one, and apply a little motion blur onto that to make it feel like it is in motion. And that's usually done in post-processing. So the original image files or the animation files, the PNGs, every single frame of that is usually, you know, just sort of standalone, completely flat, no blur effects or anything. But right here, they do make it look good. You can really see the attention to detail and how they're working with 2D effects to sort of bring more impact to this. And I think it looks good. The next thing that I do want to point out is that, like, in the background, you can actually see the low poly shading on the background objects over here, which is, in my opinion, not very good. I think it's sort of, I mean, it is cell shading, so I guess it kind of does work, but in most cases it really doesn't, because it's strange that it's attempting soft shading when cell shading is very apparently the thing that they're using here. So the fact that the buildings have soft shading on them that sort of fades out into a gradient, it just feels out of place, especially in that low poly form. I think if the entire thing was stylized like this, it would feel perfectly fine, but it's not. Some of it is cell shading, then back there you still see like the gradient shading. So it is it's definitely conflicting and clashing a little bit, just visually. Another complaint that I have is that the tumble scene takes a long time. If you are tumbling at that speed, you're not gonna tumble for that long. So, yeah. Especially from an impact like this one. It's mostly the ground that has lifted her and sent her flying. Which, you know, it is a strong one. But if you pay attention to how people react to explosions in real life, it's usually they fly back, they might tumble like 1 or 2 times, and then they're done. But here, she's like rolling across the ground for I don't even know how long. It's like, let's see. Like almost an entire 7 seconds. So that is a complaint that I have. Just pacing. It's definitely quite apparent here. And again, right here, it feels like this creature isn't really trying all that hard to actually kill her. Maybe it isn't. I don't know. But it feels like the creature is like just taking its time, like, ooh, I knocked you back. What are you gonna do? Oh, you're getting up? Too bad. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel very threatening. And then we get into the mech fight here. I think the animation actually is really good here. I don't have any complaints about the animation for this scene. This is all done in 3D, but the way that they've rigged it is very beautifully done. It sells the look of a 2D animation. Not perfectly, but it definitely gets it down and it feels right. Nothing about this feels out of place or like broken out of composition or placed into composition. Everything seems to flow quite nicely here. Even the explosion here, I mean, they handled it very well. The way that the lighting is affecting the missiles that have landed in the background, like, this is all just really good stuff. I would say the only problem is sound design here. Sound design is just kind of knocking it down a peg. And also the fact that there's no music to really amp up the situation. You know what I mean? Like, it's just it feels like ambient noise at this point. So it's either, you know, one thing or the other, where it's like you could opt in for music that carries the scene, or you can go for sound design. And they went for sound design here, but the sound design is not strong enough. Here I don't really have any complaints. Again, pretty good stuff. The voice acting is selling the emotion that I read from her face. The amount of robots that walk by, they're all sort of using the same animation preset. We talked about this in the Honkai Star Rail Firefly short, but this is something that's like, I don't know, I think they handled it well. It's hard to really point out anything that looks identical in this scene because they're all spaced out properly. They're all like between their physical space between each other and then also the timing space between each other. Everything feels randomized, but they're all using the same animation preset, so good stuff there. Doesn't feel out of place. This is honestly the cleanest example of 3D to 2D. Or sorry, not 3D to 2D. Like two different 3D planes working together to create something new. So we have the 3D render of Kiana, and then we also have the 3D render of the cubes around her. Now this could actually be all in camera, like shot in 3D camera, but these cubes just feel like they're not in the same thing because of the effects that they have on them. So maybe they are actually in the same frame, but here, I don't know, I sort of feel it, like there's just, these cubes are separate. That's what it seems like. But they did a good job with, you know, handling particle simulation here, along with the camera work of the frame where Kiana is existing. I think they actually, you know, they sell it quite nicely. There's also a distinct blur on her body compared to the armor pieces that she sort of, I can't really say she ignites them. It's more like she just materializes them. That's the word. This is really cool. Love it. Sound design is going good here as well. All of the visual effects are on point. I will say the purple can sometimes clash with the background because of how strong the glow is. If it was dialed down a little bit, it wouldn't look as, I don't know, it wouldn't look as amateur. Like, these are some very strong, like, hot pink. It's not purple. Hot pink, more like magenta, if you will. And it's like, yeah, it is a little bit too strong, in my opinion. I think for Black Lightning, it could honestly do with a bit less. And less is sometimes more, if you get what I mean. If you don't get what I mean, I don't really know how to explain. It's just subtlety is important, and it helps with the, it helps everything to not be an eyesore. Let's turn this up a little bit because this is where the music cuts in, and I would like to be able to comment on it. I do wonder. Oh, it's just the same shot, but mirrored. But honestly, the first time I watched it, I didn't even notice that. So pretty well done there. Like, yeah, it's pretty much the same shot mirrored. I will say though, they definitely changed the because of the fact that these are completely different like compositions from the 3D object to the portal, right, and all of its post-processing effects. They can actually change the rotation of these portals and, you know, make them feel like there's something different. So these are mirrored shots, but the portals are not. Now that that is a really good moment of impact. Let's just talk about like everything, because I sort of glazed over a few things. So let's go back. Right here is another pacing struggle, in my opinion, but the sound design does work. I think that it needed some sort of digital sound effect under that heel clocking sound. Like when you get that sound, you probably need something that sounds like mechanical whirring, or something that sounds like a digital screen turning on, or something to sort of emulate like those hologram fields that she's stepping on.
Fades away, where the world lies in pieces at my feet.
I will say the music here is absolutely gorgeous. The vocals of the singer who's performing this, absolutely, like, that is the highlight of this entire moment, and that's what gave me chills when watching this. Again, I think pacing is a struggle here because everything feels like it's going in slow motion. Maybe that's part of the intention, but I don't think so. It doesn't feel like it's trying to sell slow motion here. It feels like it's just everything is going a little bit slow because young animation studio. Now, this right here, it has perfect speed, perfect pacing. Like, just this moment right here, this is what... Right, this is trying to sell slow motion, and then it breaks into real time with the slam into the ground. Boom. That is great, and I think that is how real-time action should really look, because when you're punching something, you don't just... No, you... Like, that's how punches are gonna happen. So, with this... I think this sells it very well. It's like, instead of just doing the slow rotation and then boom, reaction, it's more so just like, that's good.
人類、存在そのものが間違っている。戦争。
Here is where the music really dies down, the vocals are gone, and it cuts into this more rock segment, but they've toned it down. It feels like what they've done is they've taken the music and dialed down some of the equalizer settings from like maybe the 0 hertz section all the way up to like just before 500-ish, so that it's not really cutting out the bass too much, but it is cutting out a lot of these like instruments that maybe could have had a lot more impact on the scene. And also, I mean, the sound design isn't making up for that either. It's more so focusing on the voice acting, so they've turned down the volume of everything as well in order to lift up the voice acting a bit more, but the way that it struggles because of that is, like, it just feels like this is no longer an intense scene. We don't really, like, we start to actually develop some sort of, like, okay, this character is cool, right? Like, when they do the slam right here, it's like, okay, if that's a character in that robot, that's cool. But that robot is also fighting pretty hard. So it's just like, you know, it's like, all right, that's a cool moment. What do we get after that? And into this, like, I don't know, it just feels less impactful. And I do wonder if this is a byproduct of either one, they storyboarded this, and there's many ways they could storyboard this. They could storyboard in 3D, they could storyboard in 2D. It depends on their budget and who they have actually on hand. Right? Usually, if they're storyboarding in 3D, it's all going to be key animation with just random like 3D sprites and nothing finalized. If it's in 2D, they can draw this stuff out and sort of figure out, you know, what goes where, without even needing any sort of 3D assets. But both of them are quite as efficient as the other, in my opinion. The only issue that I see is that it feels like either they created the animation after the voice acting was done, or they created the animation at least before the music was inserted, because the music just doesn't quite fit with the scene itself. That's my opinion. Maybe it could just be that the director chose a point that wasn't exactly as strong, but in my opinion, I've seen it happen multiple times where you'll have a certain runtime for an animation established, right? And you have to make use of that runtime. And yeah, a lot of times with younger studios, they're not really going to estimate what all can fill that animation time reasonably while maintaining pacing. So you'll have like a certain runtime established because, oh, we have this insert track that we want to use here, right? That's usually how it goes. We have this animation, here's the budget, here's the runtime, we have an insert track for the music that we want to drop into here and make sure that it's toward the end of it. And they're like, okay, let's do some sort of build up to that, and then we have the music going. But it sort of suffers in the way that like they have to just kind of create new action to fill in the blanks, and it makes the pacing struggle quite a lot. Because like even if you take the music out of the equation, or rather, how about this? Especially if you take the music out of the equation and it's just sound design, animation, voice acting, and 3D animation. The voice acting, the bits where she's talking, are quite spaced out to the degree that I think they probably didn't even like write her lines to fill in the gaps for the music either. So it does kind of feel like they put all this stuff together and then the music came in kind of last. Whereas that's not industry practice. Usually if you have something that you want to, you know, put together for an animation, you'd usually storyboard that thing, and then usually you'd have the script, the storyboard, you know, most of that stuff is done, and then you would hand that to a composer and try to get their take on that scene. And that way they can compose something that fits the scene without having to change the pacing of the scene, right? That's usually how it goes. But sometimes you already have stuff in your catalog from previously composed pieces that you can just use because it fits already. It has the right BPM, it has the right, you know, escalation and de-escalation, you know, all that stuff. So now this right here, this is all really clean. It feels like the production quality just bumped up like 1,000. Because we go from this right here, which honestly struggles a little bit in terms of visuals, because I think there's just way too much visual noise, and with it being mech, everything has lines on it, so the visual noise just doesn't stop. Like the hologram has a lot of visual noise because of all the lines, and then the mechs themselves have visual noise because of all the lines. So you don't even know what to look at here. It's kind of like, I mean, you might focus on this, it looks like a fist in the center right here. Looks like a fist like this, but it's probably something else, I don't know. Either way, you probably focus on that because it's center screen, right? But if it wasn't center screen, like, you wouldn't really be able to tell what's going on. Now here, it's very clearly painted, and even though here you wouldn't know what to focus on either, it's fine because we already know that this subject in its entirety is what we focus on. So it's just giving us the freedom to look at anything on that subject. It's not really, you know, a bad thing that the subject itself isn't telling you where to look on it. But also, we see very clearly that there are multiple of these landing in the same frame, and now they're all gone. So that's a little bit of a continuity error. That aside, though, just look at how clean this is. Like, this looks great. I me turn it down a little bit as well. But yeah, this looks fantastic. Also, the 2D effects and hologram UI and all that stuff set up for the robot itself, I think it looks great. What I will say is that this is not how targeting systems work. This is really, you know, it doesn't just like wobble around the target before locking on. It is going to lock on and then calibrate for a few moments so that you can actually, you know, track with your target fire. Or not your target fire. Target fire is the target firing. With your fire on the target, it needs to calibrate for a moment, and that's the only reason why you get, with targeting systems, you get like a beep, 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 beep. The long beep is like where it has calibrated and you're good to go, whereas like, you know, most of the time, the target lock itself, the little indicator, is not gonna just wobble around the object. So that's a sort of amateur animation thing that I think they probably just didn't really look into how targeting systems look, where you could probably just look up on YouTube targeting system UI and you'll probably find like real footage of military targeting systems working. This right here though, really good. I think all the, like, it sells the weight of the sort of like the ammunition process. I think it's good. I don't know, it's sci-fi ammunition and sci-fi weaponry, so you can really get away with some crazy over-the-top stuff that probably doesn't have anything on the inside that makes it make sense, but it just looks believable, and that's what's most important. Again, here we see the other mechs nearby actually just appear back into frame after they disappeared previously. It is a known animation technique to do that and sort of like clear everything out so that you can focus on just one thing, but I think there are other ways that you can go about it as well. Instead of just deleting them all from the background, you could just blur them out. It's not too difficult. Here, I think this is just a poor choice of positioning. This frame right here, not the one before it, but this frame specifically, because rule of thirds says you place things at, you know, a certain point in the frame, right? But there's no sort of rule of thirds application here. It's all just like, I don't know, they just kind of rolled the camera around and they were like, this spot kind of works, but it doesn't really tell us, like, sure, it tells us that the machines are firing, but it doesn't really show, at least in my opinion, what it might need to show in terms of like the angle that they're firing at. Over there it kind of does. The one in the distance, it definitely shows the angle. It's sort of like going up like this, right? But like this one, it's hard to tell. And beyond that, I don't know. I don't think it's a visually great shot. I think there are plenty of different camera angles that could have worked better here. That's the moral of the story. I think there are better camera angles for this shot. This right here is another pacing struggle, I would say, because all of this, right, like, we have so much leading up to this. Think about how much time has passed between the portals opening up and these machines getting ready. Let's see. If we go, okay, let's go all the way from here, right? So we have this force field, this hologram force field that comes up between the enemy mechs and what we assume is the allied mechs because they're blue, right? Just assume that that's what's happening. Also, throughout this, we don't know where Raiden Mei is. She's assumedly somewhere far behind these mechs, but we don't know. And alright, so they're starting to break through. Let's take a look at how long it takes. Okay, we're gonna be fair. I was gonna say from where the portal's open, but let's say from where the barrier goes up, right? We have an entire We have an entire 20, I want to say. Okay, well, we basically have like 30 seconds between when the barrier goes up and when these mechs actually start to fire. But also, I mean, there's not much of an indication of that barrier actually going down, I don't think. Is there? I think a great way to sort of fix the pacing here would be, since these are different mechs than the ones that we saw previously, we could have these drop in first, then the barrier goes up as they're readying up, and then the barrier drops. Seeing the barrier drop would be great, because we don't actually see that happen. But yeah, there's just a lot of ready up time. Like, there's just a lot. It feels like all of this is one continued action sequence where they fly out, they kill a few things, and then the barrier comes up and it stops them, right? But like, it feels like that all should have been kind of one swoop of action, where it's like maybe it can take place within the matter of like even 10 seconds. But it really does stretch out across this entire minute, which is quite a lot of time. Quite a lot of time. Right here, even more time is taken before the shots make their way toward Kiana. Now this right here, good sound design. I think it works well. It sells the scene where it's just like basically an overload of ammunition flying towards her, and then that snap just silences it all.
Hail my proud queen, on and on that waxen way, show this ebb and flow.
I'm sure there would be a lot of people who would disagree with me on what I'm about to say, but I think that the music honestly could have started much sooner. Like right here. That moment where the vocals kick back in on the music, I think it would have been great to have it start right here. And then the vocals kind of snap out when she snaps. I think that would have been fantastic. And then it could go back to sound design where it's sort of like, once her snap happens, instead of having the vocals kick in, they will be fading out, and you'll have the sound design coming back in with the portals going, you know, kind of bubbling and breaking all of the, not really breaking, but like absorbing the impact of these ammunition rounds. Because I think that this would have been a great sound design moment. And then we could have had the voice, the vocals sort of come back in with the high. I don't know. I think there's just again, it's a product of the song was either produced. It just feels like the song was produced completely separately from the animation. Whether that was before or after, it feels like the song was produced completely separate. It was an insert track entirely and not something that was built into the animation project. And here, I also have to wonder, is Raiden Mei just dead here? Because, like, she was on the ground there. So what happened to her? Did she get out, or? I don't know. Oh, there she is. So she just survived that. After getting... I mean, she was knocked back by a bit of rubble earlier, so the entire hail of, like, anti-planetary ammunition just didn't hit her at all, but it completely charred the surface of this planet. I don't know. That's just that's a continuity error in my opinion. For her to just be sitting there I think that's yeah. Again, it is just a game, but it makes it feel so much more impactful when the game treats this stuff as like what could actually happen, you know? Instead of it just being one person surviving it all. But I don't know. I mean, maybe she has some special durability, but it's hard to really sell that when she got knocked back by a little bit of rubble. You know, she got hurt, presumably pretty bad, by a little bit of rubble. So, you know, I think a lot, like, flying rubble, shrapnel, all of that, like, that is an incredible danger to her at this point. I'm not sure how she survived by just sitting there in the middle of it all. And I think it comes down to choreography and pacing yet again. It's not as poorly executed as Reburn was, but I think there's definitely a lot to genuinely critique about this. And I'm sure Honkai Impact Third fans might not like the fact that I'm critiquing it. But, you know, it is, like, to a large degree, this is just, like, it's simply byproduct of a young animation studio and the things that they might ignore when they're trying to get, you know, trying to get a cool animation out there. That's the goal, right? The goal is to make a cool animation and give that to the fans. But it is something that's like, it depends on the amount of time that they have to work with it and how they can work with the script, how they can work with the choreography and all that stuff. It takes time to actually execute on these things when you're new to it, especially because when you're new to it, you're constantly making mistakes leading up to the part where you're actually good at it. Whereas if you're already an industry professional, like already like you're at a point where you've done this about 20 times or something, you already have a good idea of what's going to work and what won't. So you're making a lot less of mistakes and more so trying to figure out where your creative limits are. And that's the difference between a young studio and an experienced studio. Because, I mean, you can have industry juniors and still make something amazing. It just depends on who's leading the project and who's there as the overseeing eye, being like, okay, this right here might need to change that around, or this isn't going to work because it's not up to our standard. At this point, they probably didn't really have too much of a like serious standard of animation to really, you know, hold up to. They were establishing their standard with making this. So I think that's, again, it is what it is. But yeah, I think pacing and choreography is just like probably the worst aspects of this one. Because again, feels like the music was produced outside of the production of the animation. But aside from that, seems pretty all right. I don't know. I think it's very important to have to give your composers something to work with visually, so that they can really figure out the scene. Because they might have had the script, right? And then they handed that to a composer and was like, hey, can you do something with this script, with this scene that we've written out, to sort of like capture that feel. And the composer was like, say no more, got it. But like, you know, it is definitely, it's showing, it's telling. It just feels like, yeah, some things just feel out of place. But that is my review of Will of the Herrscher. I hope that I'm watching these in the proper order. I actually don't even know. I think I am. But yeah. Outside of that, I think it's pretty good. You know, like the animation is still good. The VFX is still good. Sound design was weak here throughout pretty much all of it, aside from some moments. You know, there were some moments where sound design was really good. And voice acting was good too. I just think some of the post-processing on that voice acting, on the, like, literally the audio file from the good performance of the voice actress, the audio files were tampered with and, you know, slapped some post-processing on them. that made it feel just a little bit much with Kiana at the very beginning. But the rest of her dialogue is perfectly fine. It's just that ear-grating screech probably needed something a bit different. Even reverb probably would have helped just a little bit. I don't know, but yeah, I think that's my entire review of this one. So we will come back to the Honkai Impact 3rd animations very soon. Hopefully, we can start getting more of them out because there are 35 of these. 35 in this playlist. Now, some of them are pretty short, so I might skip those because they're just trailers. But there are a lot. I think it's safe to say, with the trailers included, if we assume that there's a trailer for every maybe 1 out of 5 of these, you know, probably we'll still have like 24 animated shorts to go through. That's just a random number I threw out there. We'll probably still have like 24 of them to go through. So it's a lot. It is a lot. We've already watched 2 of them before this, and I think they've just been fun to really analyze and sort of give a new perspective on how the art process is handled and all of that stuff. So hopefully you guys learned something from this video, and if you did, consider subscribing. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, I don't know how you did it. It's 50 minutes long, but thank you. I appreciate it. The watch time is great. The comments that I've been getting are great. The support is great. Thank you. Either way, take care. Have a good time zone. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.